Bienvenidos a esta nueva emisión de Frente al Acontecer del Campo.
Welcome to this new issue of Frente al Acontecer del Campo. The FAO report, The State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture for 2020, shows that fish production in the world reached an estimated 179 million tons in 2018.
China sigue siendo el mayor productor de pescado.
China continues to be the largest producer of fish, with an approximate record of 35% during 2018, and America contributes about 14% to this production. Without a doubt, fish is not only a good source of food, but it is also part of a range of very important productive activities with a great impact on the world economy.
En la economía mundial. Esto nos hace preguntar.
This makes us ask, what is the most appropriate management in fish farming? What recommendations are there in the breeding and reception of fingerlings and other issues? Today we are going to learn about fish farming and some tips for handling fingerlings as well. So listen carefully.
Muy atentos.
Estamos en la granja de Primera Acuacultura Limitada, ubicada en el...
We are at the Primaria Acuicultura Limitada farm, located in the municipality of Castilla la Nueva in the department of Meta, Colombia. This is a farm that is dedicated to the production of fingerlings and fish fattening.
Producimos tilapias, tanto roja como nilótica.
In the production of fingerlings, we produce tilapia, both red and Nile, cachamas, carp, and boca chicos, and some other native species such as catfish and yamu. A fundamental and super important part for the people who receive the fingerlings that come from our first aquaculture farms is to make an adequate arrangement of the ponds where you will receive your fingerlings.
Sus alevinos. Entonces un estanque que debe estar seco, que debe estar sido desinfectado.
A pond that must be dry, disinfected, filled with about 3, 4, or 5 days in advance. Perhaps fertilized with something to start the production process of microalgae. This must be of an intermediate green color. That is not a dark green or a light green color, since it is natural food that helps your fingerlings to start.
A sus alevinos a arrancar.
Ahora vamos a aprender acerca de algunos cuidados.
Now we are going to learn about some care in broodstock ponds, tips to improve water quality, and how often it is advisable to perform an oxygen measurement in fish farming.
Oxígeno en la piscicultura.
Estamos aquí ya en los estanques de reproductores.
We are here at the broodstock ponds. After making a good selection of our broodstock, they go to the production ponds, where we leave animals at a ratio of 3 females to 1 male.
3 hembras por un macho. En estos estanques los pescamos cada 8 días para...
In these ponds we fish them every 8 days to collect the eggs from the animals and then send them to the laboratory.
En estos estanques nosotros tenemos que tener muy en cuenta las calidades de agua.
In these ponds we have to take into account the quality of the water, that they do not have nitrogen problems. For these problems we add probiotics to improve that water quality.
Para mejorar esa calidad de agua. También tenemos que tener en cuenta los niveles de oxígeno en los estanques.
We also have to take into account the oxygen levels of the ponds, because otherwise the production will be bad. With that, we have personnel who are constantly measuring every hour at night, and if the pond requires it, we turn on aeration.
Prendemos aireación para mantener los niveles de oxígeno óptimos sobre 4 miligramos por litro mínimo.
To maintain optimal oxygen levels above 4 milligrams per litre minimum. The boys here separate the females with their eggs, and those that do not produce eggs, we release them again with the males, so that the following week we can collect their eggs.
Podamos recolectar huevos de ellas. Nosotros hacemos mucha énfasis en tener una buena calidad de agua.
We place a lot of emphasis on having a good quality of water for the animals with low levels of nitrogen and phosphorus. That is why we apply probiotics, high levels of oxygen. We also give our animals a good diet to maintain good quality of eggs, and the reproducers are in constant production.
Y los reproductores estén en constante producción. Después de haber recogido las larvas de los estanques de reproductores,
After collecting the larvae from the breeding ponds, we bring them to the laboratory to finish their incubation. We give them 7 meals a day for 4 days.
Al aplicar alimentos también al sistema, empieza a haber inconvenientes con los niveles de nitrógeno en el agua.
By also applying food to the system, there are problems with the nitrogen levels in the water. We are applying probiotics to help lower them and thus maintain a good water quality for the animals.
Las recomendaciones para tener acá un buen nivel de oxígeno.
The recommendations to have a good level of oxygen, more than 5 milligrams per litre, an alkalinity of 120 milligrams per litre, and a hardness about 100 milligrams per litre.
Estamos en la sección de reproducción de reproductores de cachama.
We are in the section for cachama breeders. At the moment we have just spawned. The eggs are in the incubators that I have here next door.
Los huevos están justo en las incubadoras que tengo aquí al lado. Proceso. Seleccionamos nuestros reproductores.
To carry out the process, we select our breeders by means of a nasogastric tube. We look by egg size,
El núcleo, tantas cositas tan sencillas.
core, and other simple aspects to obtain excellent results.
Tenemos nuestros reproductores acá. Cada hembra de reproductor.
We have our reproducers here. Each cachama breeding female is marked with a microchip. Then we spawn, we keep our animals.
Mantenemos nuestros animales, los dejamos descansar.
We let them rest for 2 or 3 hours in circulars, and then we return them to the pond to have a better diet.
Para tener una mejor dieta de alimenticia. Estos animales, la dieta es totalmente balanceada durante 2 o 3 meses.
The diet of these animals is totally balanced. For 2 or 3 months we are checking them. Depending on how we see them, we continue giving them the vitamins they need. Then we let them rest for between 8 months to a year.
Durante de 8 a 1 año, 8 meses a 1 año.
Regresamos y gracias por continuar con nosotros. El pescado es una fuente.
We are back, and thank you for continuing with us. Fish is an essential source of nutrients such as iodine, vitamin D, and calcium. Essential for a healthy life and balanced nutrition, to have these benefits, fish farming must be developed with excellent practices, which begin from the stage of fingerlings. We continue learning about this important activity with our expert guest in fish farming.
Aquí estamos en la nueva instalación de producción de alevines completamente sanos.
Here we are in the new production facility for completely healthy fingerlings. The recommendation is first to calculate how much we're going to produce, how much it is going to cost us to produce, and not forget that water is not just water. Each one, depending on the region, has some characteristics and is necessary to know them before starting a crop. Second, to know what I have to fix in the water so that the system works well. How much is the alkalinity, hardness, and salinity?
Hoy encontramos todos los
Today we can find all the equipment available on the market to make these measurements and to be able to correct these parameters in the water.
El mundo empieza cultivando especies acuáticas.
The world begins cultivating aquatic species, in our case fish or shrimp, from earthen pools, which have no coating and can handle certain densities. But like any system, it also has its pros and cons, which is the least of a land system.
Un poquito de cuál es lo menos.
It is not being able to control, for example, many pathogens, bacteria, viruses or parasites that enter the animals because they are very large areas to be able to disinfect or clean them.
Para poderlas desinfectar, para poderlas limpiar. En contraprestación, un sistema tipo de membrana donde tengo mucho menos volumen.
In return, a membrane system where it has less volume, water, less area, and is much easier to control these factors. Maintain high oxygen, have my system cleaned by probiotics to keep my organic load low.
Y trabajamos con una alta densidad también, es un sistema tipo biofloc.
Here we work with a high density. It is a bioflow type system with splash type aerators which are very efficient in binding oxygen to the water.
Oxígeno ligado al agua.
They are the cheapest in terms of energy cost per kilo of oxygen bound to the water. They are equipment for very good quality and long duration to maintain oxygen levels above 4.5 milligrams per litre, as this is our goal.
El sistema de tierra también lo puede volver eficiente como lo estamos viendo hoy.
The ground system can also make it efficient. As we are seeing today, and we are going to show the viewers in this program, the fact that it is a good ground pool does not mean that it cannot also produce a good volume, maintain my oxygen levels, or that it cannot clean the system in the organic part. I can also do it. I need the equipment and the criteria.
Estamos en Castilla la Nueva, el departamento del Meta.
We are in Castilla la Nueva, in the department of Meta. At the moment we are preparing to move some animals to the fattening pond. We move a few animals in the tarpaulins as we see them there, between 7, 8, 9 kilos so as not to mistreat them. The tanks we are looking at have oxygen and salt, so that when the animal is rubbing itself, the salt helps it to heal a bit and to be in better condition in the pond. The confinement should not be so large, it should not be too tight, it should not compress, and the animal should not be stressed. Then we begin to move carefully on the canvas. There should be a few fish, as I was saying, between 7 and 8 kilos per mesh. We move it so we don't have any problem. Already when picking them up the next day, the mortality rate is minimal. At the moment, the boys are going to collect the fish in the mesh. We transfer it to the canvas, then we weigh it to get the average and the exact number of animals for each pond. They are passing the fish and we are watching with the oximeter so that the oxygen is in optimal conditions. If the oxygen drops, we have to go carry this amount of animals because we would be mistreating them. In reality, this is not difficult, it is careful. The people we have must be responsible, so that they do things in the best way, so that it does not fail. We have this oximeter. Jonathan is going to weigh the fish. With this we measure the oxygen in the ponds, so that the animal is in optimum condition. As you can see there, it is at 11.2, oxygen is super high, so we don't have any problems.
Darío en ese momento va a alimentar el estanque. Este estanque también.
Dario at the moment is going to feed the pond, which is loaded with 12 tons, with animals on average of 380 to 400 grams, and what I was saying before, it is intended to be in a raft, so that the delivery of the product is much more uniform to deliver the food in the pond.
La entrega del alimento en el estanque, ¿sí? Y en el momento de cosecha, entonces el animal sea mucho más parejo.
At the time of harvest, the animal is more even. The recommendations that must be taken into account are, knowing how the animal ended the night. We know that with the parameters that are taken every 2 hours more or less in the ponds, 24 hours a day, and with emphasis at night.
Más énfasis en la noche, que es donde el animal puede tener problemas de oxígeno y por eso estamos apoyados con...
Since during this time the animal may have oxygen problems, and for this reason we are supported by aerators, since they are the ones that will supply us with a type of artificial oxygen, because we are injecting oxygen into the water, and with the measurement we know how far it went and what treatment the animal had at night.
Dentro de la piscicultura, uno de los parámetros.
Within fish farming, one of the most important parameters to guarantee the life of the fish and mitigate diseases is to maintain a good level of oxygen. To achieve this, we must have certain procedures that we are going to learn next with our guest.
Uno de los problemas de la intensificación de los cultivos es el...
One of the problems of the intensification of the cultures is the management of the oxygen. It is not in our will to be able to maintain the level of nutrients in the pool.
En la piscina, por lo tanto, en la medida que los peces crecen más, necesitamos más alimento.
Therefore, as the fish grow, we need more food. There are more nutrients that they are going to provide us with many more algae. These algae photosynthesize in the presence of the sun, produce oxygen, and help us to save energy in a certain way to keep the system with good levels of oxygen.
En el caso de hoy, tengo un oxígeno de 11.9 miligramos por litro.
As in the case today, I have oxygen of 11.9 milligrams per litre. which is extremely high oxygen, corresponding to more than 150% of the saturation capacity of water.
Ustedes ven, tenemos nuestros equipos de aireación.
In this case, I don't need to learn aeration. As you can see, we have our aeration equipment turned off. Why? Because it is not necessary. When should I turn on my aeration equipment? Because it is not necessary. When should I turn on my aeration equipment? I must turn on my aeration equipment when the oxygen in the water is 60% saturation. In the case of farms that are located between 0 and 400 and 500 meters above sea level, that 60% must be more or less between 4 to 5 milligrams per liter, at which point I must turn on my aeration equipment. If I turn my aeration equipment on with much higher oxygen, what will happen? I'm going to spend energy. I'm going to spend useful life of the equipment, and possibly I'm going to throw oxygen into the atmosphere. It is a lot of money that I'm going to lose. So it is necessary to have calibrated equipment, to make periodic measures every 2 or 3 hours after 5 in the afternoon, record the data on a form, to know what time I should turn on the equipment, how much equipment, how my pool wakes up, and also when I should feed and start feeding. This depends if the day is cloudy, rainy, or sunny, and I repeat, how many loads of algae I have in my pond.
Continuamos con este aprendizaje acerca de la piscicultura.
We continue with learning about fish farming. One of the processes that must be carried out is the reversion. We will learn what it is about and why it is important. So let's go and learn about it.
Aquí estamos haciendo una fase muy importante para el acuacultor.
Here we are doing a very important phase for the farmer who is going to fatten. The reversion part consists of trying to inhibit the female reproductive system
Femenino de las hembras para que finalmente
so that they finally have a good growth development and do not reproduce in the ponds.
por eso es fundamental hacer una excelente reversión que se hace aplicando comida 6 veces al día.
That is why it is essential to do an excellent reversion. This is done by applying food 6 times a day so that they are continuously eating this flour.
Porque es un alimento que está diseñado con muy buena proteína porque son animales recién nacidos, son pececitos muy pequeños, como bebecitos de pez.
This is a high protein food because it is a food that is designed with very good protein. Since they are newborn animals, they are very small fish, they are babies of fish. After they finish their reversion, which is for approximately 20 days, they are taken out, classified and put into a kind of quarantine. That is where the lots are dispatched. From 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 100,000 or up to 200,000 animals, depending on the farm that requests it. Immediately afterwards, once its fingerlings arrive on the same day, food must be applied. It must not be left until the other day or 2 more days because they are very small animals. They are baby fish.
Adecuado, organizado.
So to avoid this loss, the pond must be adequate and organized the second they receive their fingerlings, and they must be fed in the same day and with a high rate so that there is a good availability and 100% of the fingerlings consume food, because they range from 30 hours without eating food to be able to quarantine and transport.
Sin consumir alimento para poder hacer cuarentena y hacer el transporte. Otra recomendación es pues ojalá que los estanques estén mallados y cubiertos como ustedes lo ven.
Another recommendation is that the pond should be covered with meshes, as you can see, with lateral meshes and the roof, to avoid aerial depredation, all of which helps to have a high percentage of survival in their pre-raising.
Uno de los sistemas que ocasionan altos costos en la piscicultura es la alimentación.
One of the systems that causes high costs in fish farming is feeding, so automated, although it has a high cost, which helps us reduce that item in the cost chain.
Cadena de costos. Aquí les estamos presentando un equipo para alimentación automática. Es un equipo que tiene...
Here we are presenting a piece of equipment for automatic feeding. It is a piece of equipment that has to be programmed so that it turns on at certain times, and at certain time it is delivering rations to the animals. What advantages does it have? The feeding of the animals is uniform. The personnel does not need to enter the water because the equipment is brought to the shore to be loaded. This equipment can be handled with 250 kilos of food and is a piece of equipment that gives the capacity to handle a swimming pool with up to 10 or 15 ton of fish.
Los alevinos después de que termina esta reversión, este proceso de alimentación aquí con...
The fingerlings, after this reversion ends in this feeding process with flower feed, are raised into some pools where a classification is carried out, and they are left there for between 24 and 30 hours of quarantine.
Para que desocupen el tracto digestivo, para ahí sí poderlos meter a una bolsa con agua limpia.
So that they vacate the digestive tract and thus be able to put them into a bag with clean, organised water and oxygen, and then transported that can last almost 24 hours. When they arrive at the site, the person must already be predisposed to do a planting, that is, to try to add some water from the pond to the bag where they go. Then short or not so long acclimatization, because if they leave the fingerlings in the bag, the oxygen will be consumed and they can be affected.
Peces pequeños, pues también cualquier ser vivo sin oxígeno pues se afecta a ese ser vivo. Y después,
After 5 or 10 minutes with more water and they are released into the pond, in half an hour or an hour, they have to start applying food.
tienen que empezar a aplicar alimento.
Estamos en el proceso de despacho. Estamos empacando animales de tilapia roja.
We are in the dispatch process. We are packing red tilapia at the moment, which are animals that are dispatched to any part of the country.
Del país. Estos animales están completamente sanos porque son animales que llegan del estanque, pasan a esta zona que es zona de despacho.
These animals are completely healthy because they are animals that arrive from the pond. They go to this dispatch area, then they have a 24 or 36 hours of quarantine, then they are checked in laboratories. They must be completely healthy.
Por tallas. Son unas tallas de 2,5 centímetros que se empacan en bolsas de 5 litros de agua o 4.
We pack them by sizes. They are sizes of 2.5 centimeters, which are packed in bags of 5 liters of water or 4, and are packed in 250 animals per bag, in boxes, with 2 bags for 250. There are 500 animals in a box.
Se marcan con el nombre del cliente y a su destino total.
These boxes are sealed, marked with the customer's name, and sent to their final destination.
Tenga en cuenta que la bolsa donde va el alevinaje vaya sana, sin ningún defecto. Segundo, que en el momento de soltar los alevinos,
The recommendations for the client must take into account that the bag where the fingerlings are completely healthy and without any defect. Secondly, at the time of releasing the fingerlings, they acclimatize them for 5 to 10 minutes, so that the fingerlings have a good relationship with the water where it will arrive.
de oxígeno o que al cambio de clima, de agua, de temperaturas.
And will not suffer from oxygen damage or of changes in climate or temperature. Fingerlings tend to get sick from high or low temperatures, so the idea is that they have the same water temperature as the place where they are going to arrive.
Al sitio donde van a llegar.